Clark. All right, Mr. Garcia, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to our witnesses for being here today as well. I want to just a couple notes. I think that first, I just want to note that there's been a lot of attacks, of course, on the Biden administration and the work that's happening on the border. I think that obviously, as a reminder, that Democrats also want a safe and secure border that's in the interest of everyone in our country. And I also want to note that there's been a bemoaning that, of course, that since the end of Title 42, that the chaos at the border that oftentimes many in this committee were rooting for just also did not happen. And so once again, it's very clear that we're getting another political hearing, another distraction from the real issues that are in front of our country. I also want to note that there's been, once again, a repeating of things that have been debunked by witnesses, by experts, repeated over and over in this committee. We've been ignoring the facts about fentanyl. We want to blame the opioid epidemic on people that are seeking their legal right to asylum and not actually on the failures of our treatment system in the United States. Folks want to feed a narrative that if we just invade Mexico, things will get better in this country, and all these things, along with false claims that our border is somehow open. The men and women of our Department of DHS and our partnerships with NGOs and in Mexico are doing their jobs. And again, the border is not open, and we continue to do that work in this country. I also want to just remind members of this committee, there's been a lot of back and forth on the issues around family separation, and I want to give Ms. Acer a chance to respond to this. We've heard a lot about family separation under the Trump administration, and specifically, quite frankly, a rewriting of what actually happened and of history. Can you clarify the actual differences between what happened in the Trump administration to what's happening today?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Trump administration initiated policies that they knew would separate children from their parents. The decision to start prosecuting families for initial entries was done with full knowledge of what the impact would be. I actually met mothers in detention centers who had been separated from their children, had no idea where they were or how to find them. It was heartbreaking as a parent.
And I want to note that I think that the differences between what's happened during the Trump administration, what's happening today, and the point of actually the whole process is completely different. And so I want to thank you for that clarification. And one other question. In this committee, we've had members of the majority work to defund programs with NGOs, particularly around with Catholic charities who's trying to support legal asylum, which is really shameful and really counterproductive to our work and our humanitarian work along the border. Can you explain why our partnerships with NGOs that are providing these services are so important to the work that DHS does and across the border?
Absolutely. Those partnerships are critical globally around the world, as well as here at home. Faith leaders, faith volunteers, employees of faith organizations and other NGOs, are inspiring. Those who are motivated by their religions are trying to welcome the stranger day in and day out through their work. Refugees around the world are welcomed by faith-based and other organizations. That's critical to enable all the other countries to be hosting refugees. But here at home, we need more support for the organizations that are working to welcome refugees into our communities. There's also a disgraceful lack of support for the organizations in Mexico that are struggling to host refugees who are now waiting to seek asylum at our ports of entry.
Thank you. And finally, I just want to note, I know there's been discussion about the One App application, and I think one of the key reasons that conditions have improved and really we're focused on legal pathways is because the CB One App, the CBP One App, after we all agree a difficult rollout has actually made things a lot better. And so I just want to thank everyone that worked on that, the department, so many groups that have been involved in the rollout. And now over 1,000 migrants a day are able to use that app to exercise their legal right to asylum, which I think is really important. It is a legal right, even though some in the majority choose to not see it that way. I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields. The chair recognizes Ms. Green of Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's interesting to me to listen to some Democrats here on the committee trying to harp on the very idea that Mr. Wolf is somehow illegitimate as the former acting secretary. We Republicans here, we are committed to searching for answers as to why this administration continues to inflict catastrophic damage to our country. And here, I just want to remind you of a few things that are very important to understand. Not only is fentanyl poisoning the #1 cause of death of young Americans ages 18 to 49, nearly 83,000 Americans have died of opioid poisonings since the year 2022, and they die weekly in my district. 96 individuals on the terrorist watch list have been apprehended. Crime has skyrocketed across the country. And we're missing 85,000 children, 85,000 children. And while Democrats across the aisle on this committee want to talk about families being separated under the Trump administration, I'd like to introduce for the record, Mr. Chairman, a letter from Custom and Border Protection saying that the Biden administration is ending DNA testing, familial DNA testing, as of, that was at the end of May 31st, 2023. So when you talk about separating children, we have the Biden administration not even testing who these adults and these children are. And I can't comprehend it. Everyone in this room knows what an Amber Alert is. We all get them on our phones, right? This is when a child has been kidnapped. And we are so concerned in this country about children who have been kidnapped that we have something called an Amber Alert, notifying all of us that there is a missing child. 85,000 children missing, migrant children missing in the United States, is the same thing as 85,000 Amber Alerts. It's unbelievable. Mr. Wolf, many of the children are brought to the United States by coyotes and human smugglers. In your view, how is Secretary Mayorkas responsible for exasperating the unaccompanied children humanitarian crisis?
Well, it's not just one action. It's obviously a culmination of a variety of different incentives. It's an incentive structure that has been created over the past 27 months that allows individuals to come into the country and remain into the country. When you exempt UACs from Title 42, that sends a signal to the cartels and to everyone else to smuggle as many children across that border as humanly possible. We know they're going to stay in the United States. So when you make these categorical pronouncements, the cartels are watching and they are paying attention. And just to key off on your last point, not only did DNA testing about to end, the vetting of sponsors also ended at HHS under this administration. No more vetting, detailed, in-depth vetting of sponsors. We also increased vetting of other household members. We didn't just want to know who the sponsor was. We wanted to know other household members and dive into those backgrounds. That was eliminated as well. Site visits, not every home was visited, but random site visits to make sure that those children were where they said they would be, also eliminated under this administration. So the idea that somehow they're protecting children because they needed to facilitate the flow out of HHS facilities quicker and quicker is a misnomer.
Unbelievable. Mr. Scott, it has been reported that many minors at the southwest border are in fact related to adults with whom they are traveling. In fact, some of them are even recycled. I can't even comprehend using the term recycled when it comes to children. And these kids are used again by different cartels and human smugglers to guarantee admission of family units. In your estimation, has this exploitation of minors exponentially expanded under the Mayorkas' policies?
I believe it has, and this is why. Every one of those child recycling cases, and if you don't understand what that means a child being teamed up with a fake family over and over again, so he has to make that trip over and over again because that gets them to become a family unit and they get into that categorical exemption, they get released. Every one of those cases was discovered by an agent interviewing the child and finding little cracks in the story. That takes time. The agents don't have that time today. Those conversations are no longer going on at all. They're being pumped through the system like fast food commodities. Worse than that, now the DNA piece of it is being shut down as well. That was one of the last tools to be able to quickly be able to prove somebody was not related. That doesn't mean that there's not some kind of a connection there, but that gave the agents a tool. Most people broke immediately when they believed they were going to be subjected to the DNA. You didn't even have to do it. This administration knows they're putting children at risk every day. They're enticing them to come to the country, and it defies common sense.
Thank you. He should be impeached.
Gentlelady
That-
yields. The chair recognizes Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and let me thank the distinguished ranking member and chairman and my colleagues and members and the witnesses. Every time you put yourself forward, we certainly thank you very much. But this is a journey that I've taken now for 28 years, maybe a little shorter, and it never fails that whenever a Republican administration is in, my Republican friends are in the majority, there is an enormous crisis, and the executive does nothing. There is no effort to write legislation. There's no effort to correct what any one of you are saying. And it is, with all due respect and admiration and friendship, it's a broken record. It is literally a broken record. Before the late John McCain passed, there was a Gang of Eight who had an enormous contribution to trying to do an overhaul over immigration reform. And it was the party that is now in charge of the House that blocked it. I worked with, on this committee, a chairwoman by the name of Candace Miller from Michigan. We worked on comprehensive immigration reform measures to address the U.S.-Mexico border, which was blocked by the Republican leadership at that time. Do your homework. In years past, we've written legislation to provide the border personnel every manner of support we could give them. So let me be very clear. The Remain in Mexico program was horrible because I went and visited the squatter that the people were sitting in. There was nowhere for them to go. It was misery. Nothing was happening. The border wall, you can get a nice comment and quote, our men and women at the border are very nice people. They will give you quotes. But it is well known that most of fentanyl comes through the United States citizens through legal ports of entry. And it is also well known that even though you'll say, well, that's because we need more border wall, that the border communities fight you for the border wall not to have it. And smugglers and others find other ways. As relates to the asylum cooperative agreements, we have agreements now with Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, and Nicaragua. And as relates to Title 42, the Republicans voted to end the public health provision that the president ended, and by its very essence, you ended Title 42. Let me quickly, because I will be going to one witness, because all the other witnesses, I know what you're going to say, but I do appreciate the work that Ms. Acer is doing, so please be ready for a question. I'm trying to get through. I heard the word impeachment. I don't know whether it was going in the direction of my president, the President of the United States, or whether it was going in terms of Secretary Mayorkas, a immigrant himself, who pulled himself up by the bootstraps and has more commitment in his tiny finger than what I would imagine some who advocate against him. And I make that generic. But Secretary Mayorkas has done nothing contrary to his boss. He is a member of the cabinet, and his boss wants America to be safe, the President of the United States. And every aspect of work that we can do, from the increased resources, from adding to the additional personnel, to creating pathways for people to parole in, for creating the app, and the numbers have gone down. They surge up, they go down. It depends upon movements of people. And so you have no more answers than anyone else. Mr. Wolf, you were in there for a year or 2 years, and I don't see anything that you did that has brought down anything that we're talking about. And this is not a personal statement, because I want to add and say I appreciate your service to the nation. But everybody that's sitting there that's criticizing had their opportunity. We've got to come together as a country and stop scaring our constituents, because America is getting more diverse, and they are contributing to the economy and to the culture of this nation. The world watches as to whether or not we can make this experiment work. They're in awe of us. And they come because they're in awe, and because they're desperate, because they think this is the greatest country in the world, and it is. And its democracy, however challenged, is still standing. It bothers me to masquerade. I have this question, Mr. Chairman, ask her indulgence so she can answer it. I represent Catholic Charities and many others. I fought to get hostages back from Russia. I have dealt with the crisis of deportation, families separated. What does it do to our very dedicated nonprofits who are innocent, who have the responsibility of taking care of people in streets, people who are separated, children who are separated, people who are traveling, that you would assess them criminally or fine them so that they're so scared that they cannot do the normal humane things for individuals who even may be in here on a legal pathway coming into the United States? Mr. Chairman, I ask your indulgence for her to be able to ask that question.
Just if
Answer.
you could make your answer short, Ms. Jackson Lee's already over her time, so I'll allow it. I'll allow it, and just make your answer as quick as possible.
No basis for the Secretary to be impeached, but go right ahead.
It's reprehensible. Not only does it punish people for acting on their humanitarian values, it also punishes them for acting on their faith beliefs as well. And it's totally counterproductive. I mean, here in America, we need our faith-based organizations, we need our communities to step up and be part of the solution. And many Americans want to do that and are doing that as we speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlelady yields. I now recognize Mr. Lalota for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, sir, for your leadership in bringing this committee together on this hearing and for your efforts to make my constituents' life safer for securing the southwest border. I appreciate the witnesses and your expertise being here. I represent the 1st Congressional District of New York. The western edge of my district is about an hour or so east of New York City. And over the past several weeks, my constituents have heard how New York City's sanctuary city policies, coupled, of course, with our country's non-secure and wide open southwest border, have overwhelmed New York City's resources, previously meant for the homeless, for folks suffering from substance abuse and veterans in need. And given the influx of migrants who are attracted to New York City because of those sanctuary city policies, the city can no longer handle the influx of those migrants. And in response, New York City Mayor Adams is now attempting to sending those same migrants who are attracted by those sanctuary city policies to suburban counties throughout the state who have expressly rejected those sanctuary city policies. And Mr. Wolf, that leads me to my first question, sir. Can you please explain what sort of costs, such as monetary, personnel, public safety, are imposed on states, cities, and counties in dealing with the current crisis at the southwest border?
Sure, there's a variety of different costs. All of the children that we've talked about go into public education systems. English is usually not their first language, and so that's going to strain public education systems in every community that they go into, certainly the ones that they go to in a large amount. Health systems, public safety systems. You now have public safety officers, law enforcement officers having to deal with additional crimes and additional incidents, particularly along the border, that I've talked to sheriffs that are overwhelmed because of what's going on. And then we talk about the money that DHS is sending to NGOs, right? Billions of dollars, I'd say millions of dollars being sent to NGOs for a crisis that they created that they're now using taxpayer dollars to send to try to solve the crisis. And so there's a lot of different costs that American taxpayers bear.
What, if anything, sir, can you say about the cost on public safety with a whole slew of unvetted adult migrants that are being shipped to suburban counties? What can you say as far as what public safety costs?
I think there's a variety of different, ways. If you talk to law enforcement officers along the border, they're dealing with crimes and they're dealing with incidents that they've never had to deal with before. When you talk of military-aged males, individuals coming over that are a certain age that are not being vetted, right? We talk about 1.5 million gotaways. These are individuals that obviously don't want to interact with law enforcement officers for a very specific reason. They're here to do bad things. Or we talk about 100,000 Afghans that weren't properly vetted. And we've seen, and there's been reports of crimes and incidents that are occurring on that front. So I think there's a variety of different things that you could point to that says if the process was followed correctly and individuals were vetted as they should be, some of this should not have occurred.
$4 billion. New York City has said that it will spend $4 billion next year caring for and housing the illegal alien population that has come to New York City because of its sanctuary city policies. $8 billion. Texas is on track to spend more than $8 billion on Operation Lone Star, doing the job that Secretary Mayorkas won't do, securing the southwest border. And another question for you, Mr. Wolf. How do these massive expenditures affect the cities and states who are forced to pay them? And is it fair for New York and Texas law-abiding taxpayers to have to suffer the burden that the open border and the sanctuary city policy?
No, none of this is fair. None of this should be occurring, but this is what happens when the federal government refuses to do its job. We've never seen this before. As I testified, it's in my oral and written, every administration has progressively tried to make improvements along that border. I would argue that some administrations did more than others, but every administration, at least in my lifetime, has done that. This is the first that has not only taken 1 or 2 steps back, we've probably taken 5 to 10 steps backwards. And so that's got to be picked up by someone. And it's different states along the border, and it's different municipalities, cities, and officials that have to pick up the slack. They have to protect their communities.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here today with your expertise and your experience. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.